Welcome back. I really think you're going to enjoy this week's episode. My oldest son Michael and I take my drag bike out of the trailer and see if we can get it fired off, as he wants to start racing it soon. The Honda 750 is finished and back up to the farmer, but we drug back yet another project from there, and we'll show that to you. As well as my second son McLean and I went up to Pennsylvania to pick up this beast behind me that we're going to talk about later as well. So again, welcome back. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. You may have seen this trailer in the background of a few of the episodes. This is our drag racing trailer. There's a junior dragster in here and a motorcycle in here. I used to drag race many years ago. I was a 3-time Virginia champion as well as a 1-time North Carolina champion. So the bike that's in here has won a whole lot of races and made a whole lot of money, and it's traveled around the country and run at quite a few tracks. My son is old enough now. He's decided he wants to take over the reins of the drag bike, so we're going to pull it out, get this thing fired up, and get him started. Here it is, a 1983 GS750 Suzuki. Everything pretty much built by me and a friend of mine. The wheelie bar, the swing arm, the rake, the tank, even the body I made myself, and including the wheel. The rear wheel is actually a one-off. Maybe we'll talk about that another day. Michael's taking the body off now. There's the fuel tank that I was talking about. Some of the mechanics that go into it we can discuss later. Right now he's pulling the carburetors off. It's been sitting for a while. It's one of the first things we need to do. So once they're pulled out of the boots, he will then roll the throttle back and get the cable off of it all the way. And the next stop is to get him to the bench. I don't expect we're going to find too much wrong with these carburetors, but since it's been sitting at least 7 years, we need to open them up and take a peek. No, they don't look too bad, just some old gas. We should be able to get these things cleaned up and maybe even fired up today. So what Michael's doing now is taking out the main jets, as well as the pilot jets are coming out as well to get cleaned up. Now he's knocking out the pins for the floats so we can get to the needle valves. You can see here he's got nothing going through the main jet. So what he's going to do next is take a soft piece of wire, put down through the port, clean out any debris, and now when he sprays through it, you'll see it spraying straight through. So that's a jet that can go back into service. Now Michael is cleaning off the floats, and he'll get those installed back into the carburetors. Now they go back in the reverse order that he took them apart. I'm going to crank a little bit first to build some oil pressure. Turn it on. Ready? What he's going to do next is he's going to open the throttle all the way while holding the clutch button. Bike will go up against the two-step, as you can hear, and then when he releases the button, we'll go full throttle. And that's how we launch the bike. Put out the junior dragster just to take a look at it, pump up the tires, and let the kids sit in it. Maybe one of the twins will be racing this one day. You see the mama bird is still guarding her eggs. It's 2 days later and you can see the birds have hatched. There's one of them looking up for some food. I'm sure the mama's out there hunting some right now. With the gold wing carburetors all back together, I'm going to feed fuel into the bank of carburetors and make sure we don't have any leaks. What I didn't want to do, I had to do. I had to separate the two carburetor banks. The plenum gasket for the intake was leaking, so gas was actually getting down into the plenum itself. So we're going to have to order one of these and put it together, and that should solve the problem. We had an intermittent start problem with the side cover on that we isolated to the inline fuse for the starter. So there's a lot of corrosion in here. What we're going to do is put in an inline fuse of our own, and then that should take care of everything. So we're going to solder it in place like you've seen us do in past episodes, and that should again take care of the problem for good. I'm going to start by cutting these two ends off. And stripping them back. You can see there's actually some corrosion right there. Get these stripped back and see how bad the wires really are. That's not too bad. It's actually not too bad either. There's a little bit of corrosion there, but most of it was in the connector itself, it looks like. These new ones come as a loop. We're just going to take and cut this in the center. Get each of these stripped back, and we'll be able to solder them in place. Just like that. With the heat shrink already in place, we'll set them up side by side, fuse them together. There we go, there's that one. Since the gauge wire on the inline fuse is a little bit thicker than the factory, we're using two different sizes of heat shrink to make sure everything is sealed up good. So we're going to shrink both these down and together. That'll keep the corrosion out. We have a really good connection for many, many years. The inline fuse came with a 20 amp fuse, but we had to step it up to a 30 for the starting circuit. So we're going to put this in place like so, bring the two together, lock it in place, and then once we zip tie this up nice and neat, put the side cover back on it, and we should be good to go. Last thing I need to do before taking it for a ride is get this chain adjusted. You want a little bit of slop in it, 1 to 1.5 inch of slop or play in the chain to allow for suspension travel. This one's got a lot more than that, so we're going to adjust this chain. First thing we need to do is loosen the axle nut, which I've already done, and then also loosen the jam nuts here on each side of the bike so that we can make our adjustments with the adjustment bolt right here. What we're going to do while making the adjustment here equally on both sides is we're going to be watching on both sides for these grooves cut into here, and then the different scale of grooves cut into the swing arm, and we're going to match these side to side. That'll make sure that the chain gets tightened correctly, but also that the wheel is tracking straight. Alright, I'm hoping you can see the scale and how it's moving back as I'm tightening the adjuster. I'm going to bring it back until it's between two of those marks in the swing arm. You can check the chain again. Still a lot of slop. So we'll continue on this one. We'll put it on a hash mark this time. Then I'll do the same to the other side. Then check the chain again. Alright, with it on that groove there, we've got just a little bit of play in the chain now. Enough to allow for suspension travel, but not too loose. It does look like this chain and sprocket should be replaced soon if this guy's going to ride it a lot. But for right now, it's okay. So we'll get the jam nuts tight. Then we'll tighten our axle nut back. Then we're ready for our test drive. Bike's all back together and washed up. Now it's time to take it for a ride. Just delivered that Honda 750 back up the street to that farmer. He's very happy with it. But I came back with this 1968 Norton Commando 750S. So he's asking me to get this one back together for him. So this one won't be done as quickly as that Honda, but it'll be a fun project nonetheless. So we're going to get started on this thing next week with a good pressure washing, and then determining what all we're going to need to do to get this thing going. So this is something we haven't worked on for quite a while. This is the rear fender for that 94 Harley Electra-glide that we had pulled apart to put on a rear tire and paint, with kind of at a standstill right now on the pull tractor parts. So we decided to do a little wet sanding on the fender and the side covers, and maybe next week start laying some paint. About 5 years ago, when myself and some of my students were restoring the Oliver HG that's in my barn, we came across this machine behind me out in Pennsylvania. And then originally, the man that owned it would not sell it to me. It took me about 2 years to finally convince the guy to sell me after badgering him for a little while. He finally agreed to sell it. But I didn't pick it up right away because I hadn't found the machine to run it. If you recall, this past December when I went to Kansas to pick up the Electra-glide K20, I said that there was a reason specific, that exact machine I needed. And the reason why is sitting behind me right now. And I told the guy, okay, once he agreed to sell it to me, I don't want to pick it up until I have the machine to run it, because this thing takes up so much room. But I found the machine, and then him and I finally came up with a time that worked for him to go and pick up the machine. And that's what we did this week. Actually went and picked this machine up. I am extremely happy to own this piece of history. And then eventually we're going to be mating this machine to my Electra-glide K20 and bring this thing back to life. What you're looking at is a Rome grader from the mid-1920s. This machine, sold by Rome out of New York, was specifically built. They actually built these things for several different manufacturers, but this particular machine was specifically built for the Electra-glide K20, the one that I bought out in Kansas. These machines would have been used to grade highways, what highways there were in the 20s, roads on farms and whatnot. It even would have been used on earlier runways. All the controls are done by hand. The machine itself down here, this is a lower unit for a K20, the original one that was in it. It's no longer of any use, so we will be unbolting this one from it and putting my machine in it. But once the machine is moving, the operator would use all of those hand controls to control the blade and the steering, the different angles and heights, as well as the ripper assembly up front to loosen some dirt if that were necessary. And all of this is intact. Some of the mechanisms are locked up. The blade mechanisms to make it go up and down are still intact and still working, but some of the other stuff has some broken shafts that we will need to repair. Another great point to this piece is it still has intact both of its original brass information plates. Once these are cleaned up, we'll maybe find out a little bit more about this, and if there's some literature out there, we might even be able to discover exactly what year this machine was made. This is a view of what it looks like from the cockpit. You have both of your controls left and right that control the blades, different sides of the blades going up and down. We have controls for the angling the blade, pivoting the blade, steering the machine, locking the mechanism in place. There's a lot of different controls here and things to keep somebody busy while they're grading. The very end of the machine is about 20 feet from me, and where I am standing, I would actually be standing on top of the crawler. The first step in resurrecting this machine is going to be to get all of the controls functioning, and then we will work on putting the Electra-glide that I got from Kansas into this rig and make it operational. The plan is to have it running by the second week of September, because even though there are no shows right now because of what's going on, there is a guy close to us who will be having his show, but only for people with equipment that they want to bring out. So it won't be an official show open to the public, but guys like me who collect and restore these things will be able to come out, play with the machines, and show them off. And since this is the only one of these that we know exists anywhere, I'll be very happy to get this thing going and take it out so people can see it. Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll get our Norton pressure washed and see what we need to do first to get it going. We'll hopefully have some paint on a couple of panels of our 94 Electra-glide, and we'll do a full assessment of our Roam grader and see what we need to do first to get all of our controls functioning. See you next week.